This video is for entertainment purposes only. I had a bad crash with the DJI Phantom 4 Pro, and after looking at all the parts, I decided that it was probably worth the money to repair the drone I had. By buying new landing gear and a new shell, upper and lower shell, I figured that was probably about the extent of what I was going to have to invest back into it. I did have 4 new motors here already that I had bought previously, so I decided to put those on, and of course I was going to have to replace all the props too. After getting the thing just about completely back together, I discovered that I had a bad ESC board, and what that does is that controls the motor. Actually 2 motors. There's 2 motors hooked up to each board. There's 2 ESC boards in Phantom 4 Pro. And my guess is the ESC board probably got damaged when the arm broke off and tore one of the motors off. It's still economical to repair this thing by replacing the ESC board, and I think I'm going to replace both ESC boards. And once again, I say this video is way too long, but there's some people that want to see everything. And so I don't fast forward through anything. I kind of go step by step on what I do. So if you're going to watch this thing, you're probably going to want to skip through some different areas there and just kind of watch the areas that interest you. Because the video is already so long, when the ESCs come in, I'm going to make that a separate video along with the reassembly. So I hope this video helps you understand what's inside your drone, the drone that you're flying. They're pretty amazing little pieces of machinery. And we got a pretty cold night out tonight. We're at 6 below right now, and it's supposed to get down to 14 below. So I think it's going to be a good night to work on this DJI Phantom 4 Pro. Had a little crash with it, and I had the top shell come in. I had the bottom shell come in. And I have the left and right landing gear. Now these are all original DJI parts. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the camera and gimbal here. And to do that I've got a 1.5 millimeter Allen wrench. And what I'm going to do is take out the 8 screws. There's one here, 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 and here. Now the camera and gimbal are a very expensive part, so we want to be very careful while we're taking the thing apart. It would be nice to have a T-handle, but I don't have one, so I'm going to skip that one and come back to that one. And naturally, before I started this, I did take the battery out, so there is no battery in it. And now we'll go for this last ornery one here. So what ended up happening is there was a little silicone or something in the top of this screw here, and after digging that out, now I'm able to get my wrench into it. And so now we have all 8 screws out. I have 2 tables sitting right next to me where I'm going to put all the parts. And what I like to kind of do is keep all the parts together, so the gimbal screws I'll put in one pile, and then once I get the gimbal off I'll put that in the same pile. And so now I'm going to gently start prying up on the gimbal, see if I can get it to separate. Once you see it start to pop up, you just follow the gimbal all the way around. There we go. And we have the separation. And so now I can see I have a cable underneath, and it is held on by a bracket with a screw right here and a screw right here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a marker, make a mark on the bracket, the cable, and the heat sink so I can get it back on the right way. And while holding the camera and gimbal up, I'm going to remove these two screws. They are 2 Phillips head screws. And we can see my cable just popped right out. Right here, the ribbon cable, after I took the bracket off. So now we will take the camera and gimbal assembly and we'll set that off to the side. If you like, when you start taking a bunch of screws off, you can get a piece of like 2-inch masking tape, lay it down, and then set all your screws on top of the masking tape. That keeps the screws from rolling off and rolling onto the floor. The next thing I'm going to do is take this cover off here. So I'm going to mark it right here, and then put a mark on the heat sink. I've also taken pictures. We can see we have the ribbon cable here, we have a black wire, we have a light gray wire, we have a dark gray wire, and we have a white wire right there. So I've also made a drawing and written down the color code of the wires. And so I'll get my screwdriver back out. Take the one screw out. Take the other screw out. And then we're going to remove the cable bracket. Now I'm going to put the bracket and the 2 screws on the piece of paper that I drew out the wiring diagram on. And the other thing I want to show you that I was fortunate enough to see is this cable right here. It looks like this cable got partially pulled out here. So I'm going to correct that too. And now I'm going to carefully remove these 4 wires here. And I'm just going to pry up on them. And now, so I don't forget, there's 2 screws that I'm going to remove. And one is right here, and the other is right here. And now I'm going to go get a magnet. It's going to make my life a lot easier. And now I'm going to take my clear lenses off. And I'm going to do that by pushing down right there. And taking this little tab off. And now there's a little hole right here in the end. I'm going to get a small screwdriver under and pry that out. Maybe a little bit bigger screwdriver. Okay, so we have one lens off, and I'm just going to take my screwdriver and take this little sticky piece right here off. And we'll go to the next one. Actually, because of the crash, I think the next one's coming out already. And we already lost the lens on this one, so we'll pry up the sticky paper. We'll go to the next one, and actually the next arm here, it's already started coming out. So we'll just pry that out, like so. I'm going to have to use a little smaller screwdriver here. And there we go. And last but not least, and what that does is that exposes the 3 screws here and the LED. So now I think I'm ready to separate the shell, and to do that I'll take the 3 motor screws off, and then there's a screw right here, a screw right here, and then that's repeated on all the other sides. So let's go ahead and start taking the screws out. So I'm going to get a little help from my pliers here. That's kind of a long-winded screw. And we'll go to the other side here, the other arm I should say. And we have one more. And last but not least, it's kind of hard to work and make sure I'm still in the picture, so every once in a while I happen to do something off screen here. I apologize for that. Or sometimes the focus kind of gets a little weird when I'm moving my hands in front of stuff. So that's the screws for all the motors, and what I'm going to do is make a piece of paper that says motor screws. And transfer all the screws over to there. And then we have a few more to take off here. If you end up doing this, just relax, take your time, enjoy it. Enjoy the fact that you're going to try to fix this thing yourself and not have to send it in. Enjoy the fact that you can fix it, that it's fixable. And I can't forget this Lone Ranger here. And now I'll go for the inner screws, which there's 4 of. I see our temperature outside is still 6 below. That's a good thing. The only thing that would make it worse is if it was windy. And there's a possibility that this isn't going to work. I may get this all back together and find out that something got broke inside that I couldn't see. Now I'm going to tip it upside down. And we have all the screws out and sitting on the table except for the one that fell on the floor. So what I'm going to do is make another piece of paper that says, I'm going to call this lower shell screws. And I gotta stop the camera while I go find the other one. I don't know if I mentioned it or not, but I was using a 2mm Allen wrench on those. Now this shell probably is not going to be as hard to separate because we can see we have a lot of damage right here. But if the shell wasn't damaged this bad, normally what I would do is I would turn it to a spot like right in here, and I just start pushing down. I would push down on the lower part of the shell because there's tabs all along here. By pushing down on the lower part of the shell, that kind of releases the tabs, And then you can get something to pry with. Something like that. You can see how easy that came apart. They won't normally come apart that easy. But because this shell is so damaged, this did come apart pretty easy. So they have what they call spudgers. They're little plastic, we'll call them little plastic pry bars. So if you get one of these plastic spudgers, if you can get a crack started in there, you can get the spudger started and start separating while you're pushing down on the lower shell here, just like that. And then once you get a gap in there, put another spudger in there, and then just start working that other spudger up. I usually go from the end to the center, or right about here. This seems to be a pretty flexible area. But it's going to take some time, and it's going to take some patience. If you're going to reuse your shell, you have to use a little patience. So I'll get this separated, and then we'll look at the two pieces when they're separated. There's also, yeah, that's separated pretty good. That was actually broken. But there's also a GPS antenna right in the upper shell here, and that's connected by a ribbon cable. So when we separate the two shells, we have to be cautious of that cable. So now what I'm going to do is get in there and press down and pry up. And we just heard it pop. We'll do the same thing on this side here. And like I say, because this shell was damaged, this is coming apart much easier than they normally would. When the shell gets cracked, they kind of lose their integrity a little bit. Now here's part of the arm here. And basically I can see this gap here, so this is really the edge that I want to start working. So I'm pressing down right here and prying up in between, and we can see we should just about be apart. So we'll just work our way around. Okay, so I can see right here, this metal tab here is kind of getting caught in the shell, and this metal tab here is getting caught in the shell, so I'm just going to move those out of the way. And then as I continue to separate, that evidently must have been what was holding them, was that those two metal tabs there. So now, and so now after separating these two a little bit, I see I've got a couple wires here that have to come off. One right here, and this one actually came out. And so, I'm going to take my screwdriver and just pry that out. This one is not coming out so well. So I'll just try to work it out, and it is stuck. There we go. Now I kind of made a mess out of this, but I'm not real concerned because I'm going to have new wires on my landing gear, on my new landing gear. So I'm not really too concerned about that. So now I have the two shells separated, and we can see how the wires come up through the landing gear right here. Now I tried to just push this ribbon cable in a little bit, but it's not in enough to make me satisfied here, so I'm going to just remove this tape here. And then I'm going to try to carefully push the cable back into position. Which may not be so easy to do. Okay, I probably can't show you how I did this, so I'm just going to have to describe it. Basically what I did is I grabbed the cable, and there's kind of a harder plastic tab here, and I had to line the cable up with the connector here, and then I had to just push in straight. So you have to make sure everything's lined up right, and then you have to get onto the hard part of the plastic, and you just have to push in. So now I'm going to put my tape back down, and I am happy with that. If I look at the other side here, we look pretty close. So I'm not sure what caused that to get pulled out. I would probably say this circuit board here looks like it's rubber mounted, and I would maybe say because of the impact that may have pulled that cable out just a little bit. So now we can see, looking at some of the electronics here, we can see right here and right here are the two forward facing cameras. Right here and right here are your infrared sensors. Right here and right here are your backward facing cameras. You have your two ultrasonic sensors right here, and then there's two down-firing cameras right here. So now the next thing I'm going to do is remove the LEDs from the arms, and you can see the LED right here, and the LED is held in by two pegs, one right here and one right here, and what they do is they just heat the plastic up and kind of smash them over. So I'm going to have to take, probably use my utility knife, and I'm just going to scrape off some of the plastic. So let me go back out here. See if I can do this without cutting my finger off. I'm going to swing that around. I suppose the other way you could do is you could probably heat it up. That might work. You could heat the plastic back up. Probably a safer way to do it. But now you can see I just cut the two little tabs holding it down up. Cut them off, I should say. Now let me take my little screwdriver here, and we'll just pry that up. And we're going to repeat that. And then we have one more off. If you're a screwdriver manufacturer, if I made a screwdriver, I would make it so it doesn't roll off the table. Just a little clue. If you make one, I will buy it. Okay, there's 3 and I still have all my fingers. That's a good thing. Now, oops, sorry about that. I'm going to have to do a little wire repair right here in this one here. Then when I put these back in, what I'll do is I'll just use a soldering iron and remelt those tabs back over to hold them on. Well, that's kind of good. I guess I have a little bit more wire than I thought I was going to on it, so I'll put that aside. Now this is going to be kind of hard to show you too, but I'll do my best here. There's a kind of a board right here. It's got a screw right here. And then right down here, it's silicone to the shell. And on the opposite side, we have one right here too. And I would probably say you can't see the silicone, but there's silicone right there. So what I'm going to do is see if I can't cut the silicone to release these 2 boards here from the top of the shell. So the thing I'm going to use to cut the silicone, I got this little set. It's kind of like a hobbyist set. It's almost like a dental pick set, only it's got a bunch of different accessories on it. And this end right here is sharpened. And what I'm going to do is try to stick it down the side and see if I can't cut the silicone. So, I think we're starting to see some success here. Even though silicone is rubbery, it actually is some pretty tough stuff. And that side cut much easier. to go back in and this side here and work this side a little bit more. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. And now there's 4 screws I'm going to have to take off. One is right here. One is right here. One is right here. And one is right here. And that's going to separate this whole assembly off the top shell. They do have some silicone blobbed in there, so I'm going to have to cut that away first so I can get at the screws. And I think I got enough silicone cut away to where I can get these screws out now. There's one. Two. Well, there goes one on the floor. I have to pick that up in a little bit. But that was the third one. And fourth, so I'm going to make up another piece of paper and I'm going to label that upper shell main screw. Okay, now I'm going to have to go pick that one up off the floor. And I forgot to say I used a 2mm wrench on that to take those screws out. And now we should be able to start separating this. So you want to go all the way around and look. Make sure everything wants to come out okay. We have our motor wires stuck in yet. So we'll get those unstuck from the silicone. They've got silicone dabbed in there. I imagine probably to keep the wires from vibrating. And we can see we're making some progress. Okay, now as we mentioned, in the upper shell here, we have the GPS. And the GPS antenna, I should say GPS antenna, the GPS antenna is right up in here. And right here, we have the wire connecting the GPS antenna. I'm going to see if I can get in there with my fingers and wiggle. What I did is just got on each side with my fingers and just wiggled it back and forth. And now we're unhooked from our GPS antenna. So now we're going to get into the part that usually scares a lot of people away, and that is soldering on new motors. I've seen some people use some types of splices. They'll cut the wires and splice the wire together. But I just think that you're better off if you solder the wires right to the board. So basically, in order to solder, you need a soldering iron, and you need a pencil type soldering iron, and you need some rosin core solder. And there's two types of solder. You can get a rosin core, well actually three types. You can get a rosin core, a solid core, and an acid core. The acid core is used for plumbing. You do not want to use acid core because acid core will corrode your connections. The rosin core is made for electrical work. There's also a couple different methods of desoldering, and one is with a soldering braid like this. This is just basically a braid of wire, and what you do is you put the braid on the area that you want to desolder, and you touch it with your soldering iron, and it just naturally wicks the solder up into this little braid here. Now I found on Phantom 3, when I replaced the motors on the Phantom 3, I did not have much luck using the soldering braid. What I did use last time was this soldering sucker, and that's kind of a funny name, but that's exactly what it does. It's a little manual vacuum pump. You just push the plunger down, and then you heat your solder up till it's molten, and you touch the tip down by the molten solder, and then you just press this button here, and it sends that piston back up, and it sucks the solder right out of the joint that you're trying to desolder. Now once you start your soldering iron up, once you plug it in, your soldering iron is going to get hot. If you touch the tip, it's going to burn you instantly. If you touch anything wood, it's going to burn the wood. So once you get the soldering iron hot, you want to be careful with it. One of the other things too is when you're soldering to a circuit board, you can overheat the circuit board. So you have to kind of limit the amount of heat you put onto the circuit board. The other thing too is when you're soldering things back, you have to have enough heat so that your solder joint gets hot enough so you get a good solder joint and not a cold solder joint. So this is definitely a spot where you really need to know your limitations so you don't do any damage to the electronic circuitry. If you don't think you're capable of doing something like this, you're best off sending the thing in. Now when it comes time to soldering new motors on, one thing that you need to know is two of the motors spin clockwise and two of the motors spin counterclockwise. If you look at your DJI drone, you can see where the prop mounts right here. We have black dots on this one and black dots on this one. So these two motors are the same. This motor here has nothing on it, it's just all white. This motor here is all white. So these two motors are the same. When you solder your motors on, you have to have the motors in the same orientation as the motors you took off. So we can see with the new motors I'm going to put on, we have black dot on top, black dot on top, white, and they're going to have to replace each motor that I take off in the same position. So what I'm going to do to make sure that I don't mix these up is I am going to make myself a drawing, and I'm going to look here. For instance, this is a motor with just white on it, and I'm going to make a drawing showing that that goes to that part of the circuit board. This one here is a motor with a black dot on it, and that is going to be soldered on right here. And I'm going to do the same thing with the other two, so I get the things, the motors in the proper position when I solder them back on the board. So basically I just make a simple drawing like this. Doesn't have to be anything too complicated. You don't need to know AutoCAD or anything like that. So basically this is the circuit board right here. We have the battery end right here. So I write battery down there. I have a white motor here, a black motor here, a white here, and a black there. That way I have a reference, and I know I'm going to get it right. Now everybody has a different way to do it, but to hold this the circuitry up from the shell here while the motors are still soldered, I'm just going to put this old used cleaning cloth in between the circuitry and the shell. That lifts the circuitry up to where I can get at it, and if I touch the old rag with the soldering iron, put a little burn hole in it, I don't really care. The next thing I'm going to have to do is we can see that with these wires here we have silicone, and so I'm going to have to try to get some of that silicone off. And so now I got the wires worked out of the silicone. We can see that we have from the top to the bottom here, we've got black, gray, and white, and each of these colors are marked on the circuit board, so it shouldn't be too hard to get those back where they need to be. Now they make soldering iron holders. I don't have one, so what I'll usually do is when I'm not using the soldering iron, I'll just take something heavy and weight the end down so the soldering iron doesn't do a nosedive forward into your table or whatever you've got. The other thing I have here is I have a paper towel, a wetted paper towel, and once the soldering iron gets up to temperature, I'm just going to wipe it on this wet paper towel to kind of clean the soldering iron off. Now when I'm done using my rosin core solder, I pinch the end a little bit to keep the rosin from coming out. And now that I'm going to use it, I'm just going to take a little nipper and nip that tip right off. So the things I'm going to have around me here is I'm going to have my solder, I'm going to have my needle nose pliers, I'm going to have the solder sucker, and I'm going to have the soldering iron. The soldering iron's been heating up for a little bit, so what I'll do now is rub it on the paper towel, the wet paper towel, to clean it off a little bit. And then what I'm going to do is take a little solder and tin the soldering iron. What this will do is this will help the transfer of heat. My soldering iron is not quite hot enough yet though. When your soldering iron is hot enough, when you touch it with solder, the solder should just flow right onto the tip. Okay, I'm going to try to do one of these so you can see it, but I'm not going to guarantee you anything. My soldering iron has been warming up for a while now, and I'm going to tin it. There we go, clean it off a little bit. You can see the solder flows pretty good on it. So what I'll do is I will start heating up the first joint. And you'll feel the solder start to melt. Okay, there we go. So basically what just happened there is the solder started to melt. I hit the button here to suck the solder up, and we have one lead off. That is the black lead. Okay. Okay, we're going to have to let my soldering iron warm up a little bit. The second wire I was just able to heat up and then pull the wire right off, so maybe I can do that in the rest of them. That will make it easier. We'll give it a try. Let me tin my soldering iron one more time. There we go. And that really does help to tin the iron there. Makes the heat transfer much better. Now I'll have to turn this off while I turn the drone around. I guess I don't have to turn it around. We have one more wire set right here. Nope. Okay. That is 2. And we have to desolder the one wires right here. This is on the broken arm. And the wires right here. So, see what we can do. And we'll take care of a little silicone there. And now I'm going to turn this around just to get a little better angle at it. Well, there's always got to be one. So let me go with the black here. No, actually I think I'm going to re-tin here. That one is putting up a fight. But here again, patience. You gotta have patience, said the doctor. Come to Papa. There is gotta be something different. I'm going to stop, let my soldering iron heat up. For some reason that wire there is really on there. Let me do a little cleaning. Try a little tinning. Looks like I'm going to be in for a new soldering iron pretty quick. This is just a cheapy $5 soldering iron. I should buy a nicer one, but I don't do that much soldering anymore. Come on. There we go. Now we can see right there that is really sloppy, and we're going to have to take care of that. Let's see if I can get in a little closer. Right there, that would be a short between those two. Between those two wires there. So I'm going to have to get in there and clean that up a little bit. And now I have the old upper shell here. I'm just going to take the old motors out. And set them aside so I don't get them mixed up. Okay, now let me see if I can come in a little bit. Okay, so this is the top shell, and this right here is magnetic shielding. The GPS antenna is actually right underneath this magnetic shielding. The magnetic shielding is held on by an adhesive, and then right where these little tabs are here, they actually go through the shielding. We can see the wire to our GPS right here, and it looks like there's a little rubber grommet there. So basically what I got to do is I got to start peeling back this foil without damaging it. Because I'm going to have to reuse it. So being as gentle as I can, we'll start peeling away. And you can see it's coming off nicely. And now we'll route the antenna wire through it, like so. And there we have it. There's the foil. So I'm going to put the sticky side up, and we can see our GPS antenna here. I'll kind of get a close-up of that. That's kind of interesting. There. And the antenna is held in by 3 screws, one here, one here, one here. So, let me get a screwdriver. And there we have it. I believe, I can't remember if it was the Phantom 3 or the Phantom 2 days when these used to be made out of ceramic, I believe, and if you had a pretty good crash they would crack, so you'd have issues with the GPS signal. Okay, now we got the new upper shell here. We'll put the GPS antenna in there. Now this is the part where I wish I had magnetic screwdriver, but I don't. So that's 2 things I need to get. I need to get a magnetic screwdriver that won't roll off the table. Ah, success. So rather than have you sit and watch me drop the screws 1,000 times, I thought I'd just put them on offline there. And now what we're going to do is put our foil back on. So we will route the GPS wire through the little cutout. And we'll get it started in our little tabs sticking out there. And now what we're going to do is just work the foil down so it's bonded to the upper shell here. And we got our little grommet sticking through there, and we'll just snug that in there real nice. There, I think that's pretty nice. And now what I'm going to do is take my motors. I need that. Okay, so my right corner here should be white, and that's white. So we'll run that through the hole there. Okay, there's kind of a little tab here that kind of locks the motor right in. Now let's see what we need. We need a black tip. So we have the black tip right there. And we'll feed that in. It should be right there. And pop that right in. Now we have up in this corner here, we have a black tip. So we'll get another black tip motor here. Hold on. There we go. And last but not least, we got another white tip motor. There we go, that's snapped in. So now I'm going to double check it. I should have white up here, and I do. I should have black down here, and I do. Should have white over here, and I do. I should have black right there, and I do. So I'm good. And now I'm going to have to strip the wires a little bit. So what I found out I got to do here, the first thing I'm going to do is resolder on this LED, and that is going to have to go right here, here, and here, 3 spots, very close together, very small. So I'm going to turn off the camera for this because you aren't going to be able to see it anyway. Okay, so I got the LED resoldered back on. Now it's time to solder on the motors. So I got the wires tinned for the motor, and what that is taking the solder in your soldering iron and just touching the two, and that will make solder kind of flow into the wire, and that's going to help when I'm soldering the wire to the board. With the solder there, it's going to want to flow much easier. So we are going to be ready to solder the motors to the board. And for at least a couple of them, I'm probably not going to be able to show you because of the way I have to keep the board while I'm soldering the wires. Okay, so I'm going to try to show you on this one. There's our white wire. And I'm going to have to clean a little silicone. I'll pick up a touch of solder here. I need a little more solder. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, we're going to try another one. Hopefully you can see this one a little better. I'm going to pick up a little solder here. Oh, that black one is just... Okay, there we have the white. Got the gray. And it was a little challenging trying to hold it where you could see it while I soldered, so I just ended up doing the rest of them off camera. But we have all the motors soldered in. And so next we're going to hook up the GPS antenna wire right here. And then I'm just going to kind of set everything in here. I'm going to have to watch all the wires, make sure the wires get to where they need to be. And let me just take one quick look around this before I attempt to do that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is try to grab the GPS antenna wire right here. And we're going to try to plug that in. And I think now I have the GPS cable plugged in to the circuit board. And that looks pretty good. So now I'm going to turn the thing over. And kind of start routing wires. And I don't know if my head's getting in any of these shots, but you'll have to pardon that if I am. Okay, that's down. That's down. That's down. That's good. So, we are going to take one of our screws. And we're going to see if we can get it started. Let me find the easiest one. I think that is over here. Okay, I'm going to have to do a little bit more alignment here. I did get one screw started. Now I'm going to attempt another screw. Nope. So, what I'm going to have to do is get my friend the needle nose and set that down. Just tip him up. All is not lost yet. Okay. I do believe we have one tight. And there's two of them tight. And I finally finagled all the screws in, the 4 screws here, and I kind of got my wires routed a little bit. The next thing I got to do is warm up my soldering iron, and I'll melt these tabs down to hold the LEDs in place. And now I think I'm done soldering, so I'm going to take my solder here and pinch the end there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my screwdriver and hold the LED flat, and just take the soldering iron and flatten it out. I think that's pretty good. Now we'll turn it and go to the next one. That's pretty good. I guess another thing a guy could do is put a little dab of glue on it. That might work too. You don't want to put too much heat on them. That one there actually didn't come out as well as the other. But I think it's going to work. Okay. Well, now I really hate to use silicone in the house here, but because it kind of stinks, but I'm going to replace the two spots, one right here and one right here that I had to cut out earlier. So I'm just going to take this little tool I had here and work it down. And now let's bring the other side over. Yeah, I like that side. That side turned out good. I may play with this side just a little bit more. Yep, I think that's good. And so now we're going to put this upper shell away for a little while, and I'm going to start working on the lower shell. So now what I'm going to do is kind of take a look at the old shell here, the bottom shell. And I'm going to look at the landing gear, see which way the wires are coming in, see how the wires are routed around. And I'm going to take my new landing gear and my new lower shell and start putting it together so they kind of match this. So the first thing I'll do is keep the orientation the same here. So I got the battery end right here. And then I'll take a look at my landing gear right here. And I see it should go on like, hold on. Okay, so we have a little halt in production here. Evidently these landing gear here, I need to get a couple cables. When I was taking this apart here, it was a little hard in this cable right here, and I don't want to reuse it. So I'm just going to order two new ones, and once I get those, I can continue on. And we have the new cables in to replace the ones that I ruined. And I'll see if I can show you why I ruined them. We'll try to zoom in here. And on the cable itself, there's two little things to push in on the end. One is right here, and one is on that side. So you have to kind of push these two little tabs in while you're pulling the cable out. And I didn't do that, I just pried it out, so I destroyed the cable. So bringing the old shell back into the picture, we can see our landing gear here. The landing gear have kind of a certain curve to it, a curve like that. And comparing them to the landing gear that was on the old one, we can see that the landing gear have to go in this orientation. And then taking the new lower shell, I can just place that right on top, so I know this landing gear goes here and this landing gear goes here. Now if we look at the cable, we can see the cable has a small connector on one end and a large connector on one end. The small connector has to be pushed through the lower shell before you install the landing gear. You cannot push the large end through this way. It won't fit. So we've got the cable pushed through, and now we're going to take our landing gear and we're going to feed the wire through. And we'll feed it through the other side with the other wire. I'm going to set my Allen wrench down. And now I'm going to feed my small cable through the landing gear. And I do have the connector hooked up. And so now we have the landing gear ready to go back on. We have two different size screws. We have a long one and a short one. And the short one goes right here, and then the long one goes towards the back. So I'm going to take my tweezers and try to work them in to the back spot here. I'm going to move that cable first. Okay, so I have the cable moved. I'm going to take my tweezers. Place that in the back. And I'm going to move my cables on this side. Okay, so I did that one off camera. That was kind of a difficult one to get in. Next time I'm not going to hook this cable up till I have the screw in, I think. And now we'll take one of the short screws here. Double check and make sure that is a short screw. Yep. And we have that one started. And that one started. And now I'm going to move the cables into the lower shell there. I'm going to take my 1.5mm Allen wrench and start a couple screws here. There's one. Okay, and I'm going to work on the other two screws, the back screws, off camera. They're going to be a little more difficult and it's going to take a little bit. And now I have both screws in. It actually wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. I have one right here and one right here. And you probably aren't going to be able to see this one because of the wires, but there is one right here and then one in the back. So now we'll take these wires here and kind of run them back into the lower shell. Let me back out a little bit here. There we go. So we'll just feed these wires back in. There we go. Now it's time for the other side. And let's get the other side back together here. So first thing I'm going to do is take my cable with the small end here. Run it through the lower shell, like so. And we'll run that cable through. We'll run that cable through. And then I need to run the small cable into the landing gear. Like so. And we'll tip it over. Whoops. And make sure we don't have any cables pinched. We'll take the tweezers here and one of the long screws, and I have to move this wire out of the way, like so. And we got the long screw in. This takes a little patience, so if you're having a bad day, it's probably not a good day to do this. And there we have that one in. Bring this wire out a little bit. Well, it looks like I just dropped the small or the long screw, so I got to pick that up. Okay, we're back in action here. They make better tweezers for doing this too, but this is the only one I have, so there we go. And we'll take the short one and put him in there. We'll get everything lined up, making sure none of the wires are pinched. Take our 1.5 millimeter.
What would you like to play next?
And now we have all 4 screws tight. And now I'm going to hook up my compass cable right here. I'm going to do that off camera because you aren't going to be able to see it, and I'm not going to be able to maneuver this thing in position so I can see. So let's get that done. And I have the wire hooked into the compass right here. If your eyes are getting a little bit older like mine are, you just got to keep trying. It isn't too difficult, but it is a little bit in the delicate side. And now looking at the old shell, I'm just going to route the wires on my new shell the same way. So now comes the fun part. We have to mate the top shell with the bottom shell. So I'm going to kind of tuck my wires out of the way if I can. And we're going to have to slowly mate the two together. Oops. We need to have this wire coming out here. So let's try that again. Okay, now I lost the other wire. There we go. Okay, now we have a new challenge, and that is to get this compass wire plugged in. So let me see if I can kind of work it in here. You know, yeah. Well, let me get Mr. Tweezers out here. Okay, that's the first one. That's the easy one. Now, let me see if I can move these wires to the side a little bit, like so. And I know you can't see with my fingers in the way, but there's nothing I can do about that. So close. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We are going to get Mr. Screwdriver in there and just move these wires a little bit. Getting closer. Close. There we go. Okay. And so as we lower it, I need to look around and tuck any wires in the spot if they need to be in a certain spot so they don't get pinched. And we are coming together. Okay. We're actually starting to look pretty good. Now we have these two metal tabs that gave us a fit last time we were trying to take it apart. And so what we have to do is just move those. There we go. And we'll get our wires on the other side of them. Of the tab there. Okay. So this is kind of what we look like right here now, and let me zoom in a little bit. And what I'm going to have to do is connect the antenna wires now. So what I have to do is go back to my drawing, and I see on my drawing I have the ribbon cable here. I have the black wire right here. Then we have the light gray wire here. We have the dark gray wire right here. And last but not least, we have the white wire right here. So now I just have to hook them up. And you probably wonder why we're taking all back apart here, and the reason is I found a bad ESC board after doing a little more thorough checking. And the ESC is a motor controller board, and let's see, that would be this board right here. It also houses the infrared sensors on it. And so basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to hunt around for a good price on a couple ESC boards, and I'll replace them both. So for now I'm going to end this video, and when I get some ESCs in, I will replace those on another video, and then basically we'll have a reassemble video after the ESCs are replaced.